Χαίρετε κυρίες και κύριοι. Σήμερα έχουμε τη μεγάλη τιμή να συναντούμε τον χημικό επιστήμονα, ο οποίος πέρυσι τιμήθηκε με το βραβείο Νόμπελ, τον Ζαν Πιερ Σοβάζ. Good afternoon to you too, Mr. Σοβάζ.
Good afternoon.
It's a great honor.
Thank you, thank you.
It's been a year since you were awarded the Nobel Prize. How does this ultimate honor feel a year later?
Well, I still have difficulties to believe that it is real, but gradually I get used to that. Fortunately, I should say that it changed completely my life.
How?
Because I'm solicited, by many institutions, many people who would like me to visit them and to give lectures, to talk to many people. So it's a big change in my life.
Funding is also an issue for scientists that are dedicated to basic research.
Yeah, funding can be a problem for sure.
Does Nobel Prize make it easier also?
I think, the Nobel Prize makes it easier to all the people working in the field of molecular machines, dynamic molecules. Of course, it makes it much easier. Now, the various institutions financing research are more favorable to the field.
I was wondering whether the scientists like you are worried about the result, the outcome of the research. If you sign any ethical protocols with the institutes that order or fund the researches.
You mean if the research we do will satisfy them? Is it what you mean?
I mean whether there is an ethical protocol about the correct use and the proper use and the ethical use of the outcome.
Yeah, no, sure. Ethics are very important. I should say that for the moment, the field is very basic. Mm-hmm. And being so basic, ethics are not probably a priority. What will come out in the future in terms of applications, of course, will be very different in terms of ethical problems. But for the moment, it's not a priority.
Can you explain to us what you mean when you talk about dynamic molecules, the catenines, and how the catenines can affect our lives?
Yeah, thank you. This is a very important question. I need, maybe a bit of time to explain what dynamic molecules are. So first, we have to know that all the molecules we have made, as chemists, and mostly all the molecules of biology, and there are, of course, many different molecules, move. They undergo motions randomly. Randomly. It means we have no control. Random movements. Stochastic movements, okay. Which means that we have no control over their motion. And in biology, if you look in biology, there are several families of molecules which behave as molecular machines or even molecular motors. So they undergo very well controlled motion, very strictly controlled. And these molecular systems in biology, I insist, in biology, behave as rotary motors, behave as linear motors, behave as compressors. There are many types of molecular motors in biology. But chemists were not able to make molecular systems of this type, to control the motion. And I think what was probably the most important in our discoveries, when I say our, it means the group of laboratories working in this field, is that now we can control molecular motions, and even more, very large amplitude motions for molecular systems which have been designed and prepared.
Impressive. Can you name us some possible applications of catenines that could be revolutionary?
Sure, yeah, this is also a very important point. Catenines, they are probably one of the most families of molecules of this type, but there are also other types of molecules which behave as molecular motors or molecular machines. I just would like to name one, which is very important, rotary motors, very tiny molecules, rotary motors, which are perfect rotors, they can rotate, which have been prepared and studied by our good friend Ben Feringa in the Netherlands. And these species are not catenines. They are completely different in terms of molecular structure. But in terms of applications, generally speaking, so there are many possibilities.
Medicine, maybe?
Medicine, perhaps, but let me say that there is already one application, one commercial application of catenanes and rotaxanes. Rotaxanes are rings threaded by an axis.
Yes.
And in particular, the people in Japan, they could make some materials which are very, very flexible.
Adjustable to the environment.
Well, not so much.
Smart materials.
Yeah, smart materials in the sense that they make films, material, very thin films. And these films can be folded, as many times as you like. But because of the interlocking nature of the molecules, they are very, very flexible, incredibly flexible. And you can fold them, you can do whatever you like with them. They will never break. And it's really interesting. And they made some films for protecting smartphones. And in particular, there were smartphones a couple of years ago which were foldable in two parts. Huh. And in this part, at the junction, classical films would break after a few thousand times of folding. And with the new materials, you can do it as many times as you like, and there is no degradation.
And are these appliances expensive by now?
I don't think they are expensive. They are expensive. They are not so precious materials. If I may say, this is a very, it's a nice application, but it's not a revolution. It's
the revolution will come maybe for medicine, medicine,
right.
Because we talk about medicines targeted when we are dealing with cancer, for instance, targeted towards the tumorous tissue.
Yeah, yes.
Is something we can hope for in the future?
I think so. You're right. It's a very big project. There are many, many groups working on this problem.
So we don't damage anymore for the audience the good tissue.
Normal tissue.
The normal tissue. We only go for
the malignant.
Yes.
Malignant tissue. You're right. But I think one can really hope, that someday it will work out.
Did you make any progress on this field?
I should say we didn't work, on this problem ourselves. And even more, I think the field is really in its infancy. Mm-hmm. This is the very beginning. But we have all the tools, which should allow us to be very optimistic. We have molecules which can move, which probably can, move in a fluid. These molecules can be attached to a container, and we know how to open a container with a lid, to lift a lid in order to deliver a therapeutic molecule which will hopefully kill the malignant cell. So we have all the tools. But still, I believe a few years of work are still needed.
Also, these the catenanes can be applicable in stocking, in computer stocking, and how would this work?
Yeah, this is also a very important point.
Now we need two points in order to stoke, and I've read that we may need one. Yeah. So it's half the
solution.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but maybe I will talk about the work of our colleague and good friend, Fraser Stoddart, and his team. So they were able to prepare a small device, some electronic device, which can store information and process information. And this is based on molecules, and in particular on rotaxanes. So rotaxanes being rings threaded by an axis. And in their case, they can move the ring along the axis. And by moving the ring, they can, let's say, go from 0 to 1 in terms of binary calculation. And just to make it simple, I mean, they can store information and process information with an incredible information density.
In a smaller space.
In a very, very small space.
In a very smaller space.
In 1 square centimeter, a square centimeter, it's not much. They can store 10 to the 11th bits of information.
Wow.
Which is
impressive.
Which is wow, as you say.
Wow. Could your catenanes find application in the field of energy? Which is a crucial one, yes.
Yeah. In the field of energy, sure, you could think of, let's say, storing a molecule which is in a high energy state. Let's assume that you have a certain molecular machine. You send a flux of energy to this machine, and you will send it to a very high energy state. And if you can store this high energy state, when you need energy, you can talk to the molecule, send a signal, and it will deliver its energy. Yeah, maybe
it's a world of wonders.
Yeah,
the world
you're right.
you scientists live in, I think. Do you feel like that you are in a world when everything is possible?
Yeah. You know, we have been
where
working...
everything is possible, yes.
We have been working with molecular systems of this type for many years. And so, in a way, we got used to them. And we got used to the fact that they have really fantastic properties.
How are the catenanes can expand the horizon of nanotechnology?
So maybe I could make a point on nanotechnology and, nano objects. I think too many people, when they think nano, they think particles, nanoparticles or microparticles or in between. And those particles have been criticized, let's say, as potentially toxic. Well, nobody knows exactly, their toxicity, but this is not exactly the same field as molecular nanosciences or molecular nanotechnology. Because molecules are nano. They belong to the nano world. A molecule is very tiny. And with molecules, I think we are not facing the same problems as with particles.
How is fundamental research important, and how you could explain its importance to someone who isn't a scientist?
Yeah, this is a very important point.
Someone like me.
Like you, I'm not sure. I should say that basic science is certainly expected to lead to some applications someday. When? Nobody knows. It's extremely difficult to know how long it will take between some basic science discoveries and important applications. But something that everybody should know, basic research, fundamental research, is at the beginning of everything. If you look around here, in your surrounding, you have lots of high-tech devices, and those high-tech devices, which are, of course, technologically very important, originate from basic science. Just one example. If you think of high-tech, computers and information storage, smartphones, so the basis of that goes back to the work of American physicists, mostly in the 1930s, 1940s, and these people were mostly interested in very basic science, trying to understand semiconductors, the electronic properties of semiconductors, and they were not suspecting that someday their discoveries would lead to what we know nowadays and we have in our everyday life permanently. Just one example.
Yes, yes. You're absolutely right. So you think that the public should be informed on such delicate and specific scientific knowledge?
I think so, yes. Because, the public has the right to know. I think scientists should make a big effort, to talk to the people, to inform the public, and to inform the public in a very honest way. Very honest way. Not telling them that, so we found this.
Tell them, communicate the whole truth.
Exactly, the whole story, the whole truth, and not give the public hopes which are not realistic.
Yes, so it's very important also the role of journalists on how they pass and communicate the information, not to make something bigger or not to lessen something else.
Sure, and also I think maybe journalists could try to help scientists to trigger the interest of the public towards basic science.
Very important. So they ask, the public will ask for more and more basic researches.
Yes.
It will open and help you.
Sure, but it will also help the public.
To your difficult path, the scientist's soul, I mean. You are a member of the Institut des Sciences d'Ingénierie Supramoléculaire.
Yes.
It's not only you, since there are 6 years. Yes, it's not only you, also Jean-Marie Laine, who was your professor when you did your PhD thesis. Is a member of that institute, and he also is awarded with a Nobel Prize in 1987.
You're right.
As well as Martin Karplus, who is also a member of the Institut des Sciences, as we said, d'Ingénierie Supramoléculaire. I was wondering, because we know that research is a race and not always a noble one. Do you discuss the outcomes of your researches? Do you exchange knowledge, or you hide?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
No, we do not hide anything. But maybe I can explain, very briefly how I started in this institute. Let's call it ISIS, Institute of Science, etc. ISIS, it makes it simpler.
Yes.
So when I had to retire from the French CNRS, the research agency, I was offered a position in the US at Northwestern University. And at the same time, I was invited by the people at ISIS to join, to start a new life, in a way, a new group. And Jean-Marie Laine, who was the founder of this institute, was my former boss of many, many, many years ago. And he was also a good friend. We stayed in very good contact. And so I started there. But most of the work which led to the Nobel Prize was done before.
In
Between
1964?
No, not 64. No, I started my own group in 1980. And in 1983, 84...
You had already described it. You had,
yeah, we had already described the beginning.
Yes.
And then some molecular machines in the 90s.
You had also designed the catenanes.
Yeah, we had designed the catenanes. But something important, we also described a molecular muscle, a molecule which can contract or elongate. And I think that was of great interest to many people. And that was in the years 2000 something. So when I moved to ISIS, I was very grateful to the people when they invited me. But most of the most important discoveries had been already done in my previous group.
Of course.
Yeah.
And do you consider, I was meaning to ask you, if you consider the thesis, the essay of 1983 as a statement?
We didn't know at the time, that it was an important discovery. We knew it was novel because catenanes seemed to be impossible to make at the time. But we knew it was novel. That was it. But we had no idea, whether it would lead to a new field or not. We didn't know.
Actually, Mr. Professor, you were a student around 1968, around the 1968 May.
Yes.
A very revolutionary era.
Right, yes.
And how did that era affect you? And do you find that the slogan, "Power to the Imagination," is applicable to science?
Yeah, maybe there is some influence, I don't know. In 1968, I was also among the other students, demonstrating pacifically, but demonstrating and also discussing extensively. It was really, as we used to say, imagination at power.
Yes.
Whether it had an impact on my future or not, I don't know.
Is imagination needed in order to proceed in research?
I think this is the first quality. Mm-hmm. Imagination and passion, that is very likely to lead you towards success. But imagination is very, very important. Creativity. If you want to be creative, you must be imaginative at the same time.
There must have been difficult times during your career, which is spectacular. How did you manage to surpass them? Was it a matter of luck, of the persistence?
Yeah, in a way, I do not remember so much difficult times. The work we have done, my group and myself together, has always been very pleasant to do. Of course, we had failures because this is research. You have to encounter, many people. Sometimes, you get along well with them. Some other times, it's not so harmonious. We had, of course, difficult periods from time to time, but it's not the most important. We have always been, very optimistic and full of passion for science.
Which brings us to something I was keen to ask, whether the team is important, whether choosing your team is synonym to scientific liberty, and how different kind of people, of characters and of scientific backgrounds do you need in order to succeed?
Yeah, thank you for asking this question. It's, an absolutely essential point. experimental science is done with a team. And you know, the Nobel Prize is given to the leader of the team, but the team has an absolutely determining role in the discoveries. And I have been very lucky to work with great scientists, great researchers. In the French system, maybe you can be interested in knowing more about the French system. I don't know. In the French system, we work as teams of permanent people. You know, you have CNRS researchers, you have university professors, and very often there are a few of those people who gather, you know, in order to work together.
And you need chemistry in order to have a successful
sure.
team. So,
Yeah.
yes, as a chemist, was it easier for you to choose
Yeah, well, I think the people...
the right companions?
Yeah, it was relatively easy, because at the beginning, most of them were friends of mine.
Okay.
So we were a group of friends, you know, and we were working together, supervising the students together and doing everything together. So the team had an absolutely essential role. Essential.
Yes, I imagine.
Yeah.
Mr. Sovaz, what attracted you to science in the first place? As a teenager, you were experimenting. You always wanted to become a chemist, or?
Yeah, it's an intimate question. But when I was a teenager, I was interested in chemistry. I liked chemistry.
And mathematics?
I was better in mathematics. Mm-hmm. And when I started, you know, at the university, at the age of 18, my favorite topic was mathematics. And at some stage, I think I realized that to become a mathematician, you have to be a genius. And I was good in math, but I was by far not a genius. And so I came back to chemistry. I thought chemistry is also nice. It's also very exciting, and so I completely, you know, immersed myself in chemistry.
How is curiosity involved with imagination and knowledge? And the team? This is the cocktail, the recipe.
Yeah, right. No, I think curiosity is, of course, extremely important. But maybe I can talk about my behavior in terms of research and curiosity. You know, I had something specific. I think I'd never studied a field, you know, very much in depth. You know, some people are really experts, you know, in their tiny field, yes. You know, in their relatively narrow field, and they know everything in it, you know, absolutely everything. And for me, it was more or less the opposite. I knew a bit of many fields, and some people know everything in a very narrow field, and I was exactly the opposite.
This is my favorite topic, because I'm not for specialization.
Yes.
And I was meaning to ask you,
yes.
Because now the boundaries between sciences, I mean between biology, chemistry, sure. Physics, medicine,
you're
are
right.
less and less
they are collapsing.
visible.
Sure.
So they are
right.
collapsing. There was a time when a scientist had the knowledge of the whole.
You're right.
And I wanted to ask you if, in your opinion, we are leading towards a monoscience again. We broke the science into pieces, we specialized in these pieces, and now we're going back to appreciate the monoscience, the whole knowledge.
Yeah, you're right.
And how is that important?
Yeah, I think it's really a question of individuals. You know, some people will indeed try to break the boundaries, but it's relatively difficult. You know, you have to learn, you know, many things in fields which you are not necessarily familiar with. If I can talk about my personal experience, in my team, we had experts. So I was working, with people very often of my age, who were also friends, and they were more specialized. I mean, they knew more in their field than what I knew myself.
Like a maestro.
Well, I'm not sure, but yeah, perhaps, I don't know. But they were very, very good, they knew everything in their field. And I was lucky enough to be able to attract people from various fields, various fields in chemistry, but very diversified.
You synthesized their knowledge, their background.
Yeah, in a way,
which
perhaps.
Is a very important and crucial talent.
Perhaps I try to coordinate.
Yes. Are you easy or difficult to cope with?
I think I'm relatively easy to cope with. I don't know, but you should ask the other people.
And also your wife. You are married to a philosopher for 45 years.
Yeah, you're right.
And your field is that of experiments, and you have to prove everything. Her field is that of ideas and thoughts. And
sure.
how did her knowledge, her field contributes to yours?
I think my wife had a very strong influence on me, because we like to discuss, very much, to exchange ideas, even to confront ideas or opinions. And I think she had a very strong influence, also allowing me to accept the idea of very basic science, of pure creativity, without really asking yourself how long will it take before it becomes important in terms of applications. But no, just, creativity. And she was certainly very important.
But since we are in Greece, ancient Greek scientists, they were also philosophers.
Sure,
so it's a very good and a strong combination.
Yeah.
Who else influenced you? Jean-Marie Lehn, maybe?
Jean-Marie Lehn, yeah, sure. I mean, he had a very strong impact, when I was young. And later on, he represented, some kind of a model, especially after he won the Nobel Prize. But to me, he was a model which I knew I would never be able to reach, And I never thought of the Nobel Prize, to be honest.
There are scientists who go after the Nobel Prize for all their life. And we know cases where after obtaining that big honor, that big prize, they go to depression.
Yeah.
They drop to depression.
Really?
Because they don't know what to go after.
What else? Yeah.
What else is next?
Yeah.
For you, what else is next, really?
Yeah. I mean, I had no depression whatsoever. Maybe one point first, because it depends on the period. Nowadays, or at least in 2016, the Nobel Prize laureates were, in average, 72 years old.
Oh.
72.
Okay.
That was the average age. And I believe that in 2017, it's about the same, over 70. If you look back, maybe 30 years ago or 40 years ago, Nobel Prize laureates were much younger. Some of them were not even 50 or between 50 and 60. And so, of course, your future is not the same when you are 50 or when you are 72. And for me, and I think probably for the others, the future is mostly, to promote science, to promote basic research.
So the scientists should be younger?
No, it's not my point, because I think, for the Nobel Prize Committee, this is the way I think it could be. the list of potential Nobel laureates becomes longer and longer. And then, the people have to wait, more and more.
Yeah. Yes.
And so the age increases.
Okay.
But, when you are 72, well, I had more or less stopped doing research. I was very much involved in discussions, in giving lectures, all over the world, even before my Nobel Prize.
Guidance, yes.
And I think, the way I understood it was that my new mission was really education, talking to the general public, trying to show that science can be important, can also be very exciting.
A missionary.
Yeah,
yes.
kind of missionary
science. Yes.
Of science. And that's what I try to do.
How fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I have visited also many high schools, to meet kids. And that's my new, that's my new mission in a way. Yeah.
Yes. What piece of advice did you give to your son? You have a son.
Yes, I have a son, but I think he didn't need my advice. He's an engineer, and he works in the Silicon Valley in the USA, San Francisco. And he has done something totally different,
It could be an advice not applicable to science or work.
Yeah.
It could be something for life.
Yeah, sure.
For the way to something having to do with the way he can.
Yeah, the way of life, you mean.
Yes, the way of life.
Yeah. Well, the way of life, I mean, that's an advice I would give to anyone, is to do exactly what you think you are good at, and to do what you like, mostly.
What piece of advice did your father give to you to cherish?
Yeah, my father, when I was a kid, my father wanted me to be, good at school. He was very insisting on that. And even when after the French baccalaureate, he pushed me towards competitive studies. And, I obeyed.
So he set you free also.
Yeah. No, he had also an influence, yeah, sure.
In general, Mr. Professor, should there be ethical boundaries to science, and who can define these boundaries? It's a big discussion.
It's a big issue, sure.
Yes.
Ethical boundaries. I think it's probably more important in the medical sciences, in medicine, in chemistry.
In general, who could define these boundaries and whether they are needed?
Yeah, I think in France we have some kind of committee, close to the government, which defines ethical regulations. Of course, it's a very important issue. I fully agree. But making molecules, preparing new molecules, molecular machines, or molecules for storing energy, this is very far away from ethical problems, I believe.
Yes.
Today.
Always is the application, is the use
that
make
exactly. Yeah.
The difference.
Yeah.
Is nature an inspiration to you?
Yes, for sure.
For research also.
Yeah, nature has been an inspiration because, the more you learn in molecular biology, the more you are impressed, by the complexity, but also the beauty of nature, beauty in terms of intellectual reasoning, but even in terms of structure. Some molecular structures, the shape of biological molecules is absolutely gorgeous, And being in Greece, I think it's also, a very nice opportunity to say that science and art are sometimes very, very close. And many of the molecules we've made in my group are considered as pieces of art.
Yes, I saw yesterday
Yeah.
during your lecture some impressive animations. Yes, they were absolutely spectacular.
Pieces of art, you know, they are
Yes.
very tiny pieces of art, of course.
It was, I felt at some points like Alice in the Wonderland. It was,
Yes.
what if we were in there?
Yeah, but it's very close to reality.
Yes.
At the same time, yes.
I've read somewhere that you like to do gardening.
Yes, yeah, right.
Yes.
It's very relaxing, yes.
When you are tackling a problem, can you say, stop here and now I'll deal with something completely different, or it goes around your mind?
Yeah, it goes around my mind, you know, all the time.
So
yes.
No holidays? Really?
Yeah, but even in holidays, you know, I think for many scientists, you know, they never stop, in a way. And even when you wake up in the middle of the night, you know, you cannot sleep well, you know, your preoccupations, you know, your problems, research problems will come back rapidly, and they will turn in your brains, you know. And sometimes, you know, you can have good ideas, you know, doing something which is totally different than being in your lab or working in your office. I mean, when I was a kid, you know, I didn't know what to do, like basically all the kids. But when I became 17 or 18, I thought that science was my thing, you know, that I wanted to do science. And now that I'm retired, I have no research group anymore. You know, I talk about science, and I'm happy, you know, talking about science.
Mr. Sovaz, tonight you are going to become honorary professor at the National Kapodistrian University of Athens. You are also emeritus professor at the University of Strasbourg, among other distinctions. How do you feel about that honor every time it happens?
Well, I mean, of course, I'm very honored and very happy, you know, for you know, the generosity of the University of Athens. It's a great honor to become honorary doctor of a university, of course.
It makes maybe your mission easier to spread knowledge.
Yes, I'm
scientific
not sure.
Knowledge.
You know, I mean, maybe you will be surprised, but I consider myself as a very normal person, you know, very normal. I was lucky to meet people, you know, I think encounters were very, very important in my life, and to work with these people who are fantastic scientists. And we also had a bit of luck, you know, from time to time. And so our chemistry, our science worked well, no doubt. Our research worked well. I didn't expect the Nobel Prize. I received it. Okay, it was fantastic, but I mean, it was a big surprise. And so each time when I have, you know, this kind of distinction, it's a bit difficult to completely digest, you know, the information.
And the last one.
Yes.
How would you describe yourself? Like a normal person?
Oh, yes, no doubt. A very normal person with many defects, you know, many weak points, many qualities, perhaps, I don't know, but many weak points, sure.
It's been an honor, Professor. Thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you for a very pleasant interview and extremely interesting questions.
Again, the honor was mine. Και εσάς, κυρίες και κύριοι, ευχαριστούμε θερμά που παρακολουθήσατε αυτήν εδώ τη συζήτηση. Καλό σας βράδυ.